So, good afternoon from New York City, everyone. I am here today to interview and have a conversation with a really dear friend of mine, truly a brother of mine. His name is Michael Lutzenkirchen. And just to tell you a little bit about Lutze, Lutze is based in Hamburg, Germany, and I've known him for about 9 years now, I think I want to say. Uh, he's an entrepreneur. He founded Whatever Mobile in 2002 with two co-founders and then sold it in 2016 to Link Mobility, a group in Norway. He stayed on for a couple more years with Link Mobility, and then in 2018 decided to leave them and then took some time to rethink the purpose of his next venture. In November 2019, he co-founded Eco Projects Global as a not-for-profit. And the goal was to create global waste recycling system with all proceeds to finance eco-friendly projects globally with a theme, doing good with your trash. Lutzer, like I said, has been an extremely dear friend of mine for the last 8-9 years. I would very confidently say, has been one of the biggest, if not the biggest influence in my life in the last 10 years since having left the monastery. Besides being a dear friend, he's also been a great advisor and a confidant as well. So I'm happy to share him with you today and chat about a few topics which hopefully can be insightful to you during this crisis. Lutze, thank you for making time to be on this with me.
Pleasure.
How's the family and how's things in Hamburg?
Well, pretty good actually. I mean, we haven't been hit as hard as other parts of the planet by the COVID situation. My oldest daughter, she was actually infected, but she managed to get over it quite well. And interesting enough, we didn't get infected, so that was a surprise. But now she's over it. She has no health issues anymore, and she's feeling really good. And I think as we speak, she's on the bike doing some sports, so fully recovered, very good.
That's amazing. Germany has done an amazing job in dealing with this, haven't they, in Europe compared to other countries?
Yeah, I think we had a head start warning, and then I think we're very fortunate to be ruled by a scientist, our chancellor, as some people know. She's a physical expert in doctor, PhD in physics, and I think we profit from this every day. And I think our press conferences look sometimes different than the ones other people get to see on the planet. So we feel very fortunate, and I feel very fortunate.
Very different than the ones I see in New York or in the US, but we won't get into that. One thing I wanted to talk to you about today, and this is part of a conversation we were having last week, is the concept that every crisis has an end. And I think, when we're in a crisis like this, a pandemic like this, a global pandemic, which most people, I would say, have never experienced, maybe except for a few centenarians that are still alive that maybe experienced the Spanish flu. But most of us have never experienced this. And it's really, for some people, very difficult to see this coming to an end, right? I mean, what's going to happen? Does the quarantine end and we go back to normal? What's a normal? Will this all kick back again as we're seeing this happen in other countries? I would love to hear your thoughts on the concept of every crisis has an end.
Funny that we talked about it the other day, and then I read in a German newspaper that there was actually a similar situation, not as similar as Corona, but a similar situation like the one 100 years ago. When we were talking about the Spanish flu, there was something they called the Hong Kong flu in Germany, and actually in all of Europe. And they had significant numbers of casualties. They had lockdowns back then. And that was around 1969. So, which kind of reminds me that this is an imminent threat to us as human beings and the way we live and the way we are treating this planet, that we are always exposed to some sort of pandemic threat, and we have been. So I think most of us, or many of us, have seen the TED Talk of Bill Gates, where he's basically presented already something that's happening right now a couple of years ago. And I remember myself seeing it and going like, okay, that's interesting. What's the topic on the next one? So I think we've been through it, and I think that's one of the milestones in my thinking process, where I say, there is a silver lining, there's an end to every crisis, because there's always been one. I mean, and, and, and the general concept is, for me, in my belief, is, after rain, there's sun, and after sunshine, there's rain. And look at the last 10 years. I mean, we've seen increases in GDP all around the globe. We've seen tremendous wealth increase in certain groups of society. Everyone was very happy, and everyone was seeing significant progress. We've seen all-time lows on unemployment rates and stuff like this. Mm-hmm. And I think we all gotten used to it, and now we're hit by this. So, but the interesting part of this is, once, as we are being hit by this as a result after a long period of sunshine, it's also very clear that after a long period of rain, and I think we'll have that now with a number of casualties and the restrictions on our daily lives, there will always be, sunshine again. It's just the rhythm of nature.
And I think that's something that's really important for people to realize, right? I remember talking to my wife just a couple of days ago about this and the Spanish flu. And obviously I wasn't around during the Spanish flu, but when the Spanish flu was taking place, and obviously the impact of that Spanish flu was much more severe than what we're experiencing right now, and the millions and millions of deaths, I think it was really hard for people to see what the normal would be like. And I'm sure they were asking themselves, going, wow, I wonder what normal is going to be like when you're seeing tens of millions of people dying, and we're nowhere close to those numbers. And what was the normal? The normal was what we were living pre-pandemic, right? That was the normal post the Spanish flu. Mm-hmm. So at some point, we're going to hit a normal again. Mm-hmm. And this has been happening for centuries. And I think this is a really important thing that people should keep in mind.
I agree, and on top of that, I mean, if you look back then, and even if you look back in the 1970s, when my example of the Hong Kong flu in Germany and in Europe happened, we know so much more about science nowadays than we used to, and look at the power of science research is going into creating a vaccine. As we speak, which is going to be the game changer. And that's happening right now. So we have this pulsating rhythm of nature, but as human beings and the power of science that we have developed, I think we're going to recover from this more quickly than in previous pandemics. I mean, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be preparing for a pandemic somewhere in the future again, but everyone now understands that this is a threat and that we have to get used to it.
And also the technology, right? The impact of technology and the ability to track people and act so quickly when, 100 years ago, they didn't have any of those resources. I mean, people couldn't even convey messages to people in other countries or learnings.
It's kind of two ways, right? I mean, on the one side, with the technology, we're making it very easy for the virus to spread because we're traveling much more than in the past because we got the technology to do that. At the same time, the speed of information transfer is just gone way above us. So that's why we had a warning in Germany, and luckily we had politicians that were taking those warnings very seriously.
I think the biggest takeaway for people from this is that this will end. Every crisis will end at some point, and there will be a new normal, and everything will adjust to that. And there are people working very, very hard to solve this.
Exactly.
How the other thing that we also chatted about briefly last week was about seeing opportunities during this pandemic. As you know, in the US, where I think we're past 20 million people unemployed at this point. It's unprecedented, never happened before. And this is happening all over the world, right? People are, businesses are going out of business, people are losing jobs. How do we look at this as an opportunity, as opposed to sitting at home and moping that, I don't have a job, I don't have this, I don't have that? How do we see an opportunity in a crisis, not to be opportunistic, but rather to see, rather than look at it as something really negative, look at it as an opportunity to create something positive or to make a difference, or even not only to the world, but to yourself as well.
I think that's a very good question, because I believe it really depends on who you are and how you're set up. But I think there's also some things that everyone can do. And at the end of the day, I mean, we have a brain, and that brain is wired to a certain way. One is very old wiring, and one is, more recent wiring. And the old wiring is a wiring that deals with fears and threats and, immediate dangers to life. And, that's when we get impulsive. That's when we get angry. That's when we get furious. That's when we duck, when we, basically we're reacting in a very old way, because, we are experiencing something as a threat. So we're running away or we're attacking, when, like back in the bad days when we were living in the woods, in the forests, and there was a grizzly coming. So I think that is a
right that I talk often about, that animal nature of the mind.
exactly the animal nature of the mind, and that's a good thing and a bad thing again at the same time. It's a good thing because we are programmed to respond in a very quick way when there is an imminent danger.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I believe is the challenge is that we can't really do much about it. I mean, who shall we attack, right? I mean, we just have to sit there and wait, and I think that makes people very feel uncomfortable for good reason. So I believe the idea is, or for me, is if we want to come to that mindset where we start looking for the opportunity, we have to get rid of the other part. And one is it's on the different levels. So one is, I think it's super important to stay physically fit, because that has a tremendous effect on the way we think. Personally, I noticed that sleep is like my number one thing. Like if I don't sleep, my mind is gone for the next day. I can't be productive. And also I start getting bad thoughts. The second is sports. I mean, is obviously you need to have a strong body in order to feel healthy. And once we have that as a fundamentum and for our thinking, or for myself, then I'm doing actually some mental techniques, some mental hacks. I would even go that far, and bringing myself in a state of mind where I start seeking the opportunity. And in order to do that, I'm asking myself very rational questions. And questions are, for example, okay, what has changed, and what do people now need more or want more than they used to do before? What has changed for me? What is it that I'm good at? So I'm bringing those questions to myself. I'm trying to, in a very rational way, to analyze my abilities and to analyze the differences in the situation outside. And then, start trying things out. I'm going into an active mode of, where could be an opportunity. When we were checking the other day, I remember I was walking the dog, and I gave you that example of World War II. I mean, World War II was a disaster for so many countries, and obviously, originating from Germany back then, it had a tremendous disastrous effect on Germany. And the country was destroyed. Millions of people are dead. That's a dimension that we haven't, luckily haven't reached with the current crisis. And there were some people who took the opportunity. They looked at the opportunity. They saw what's different. They saw what's needed, and then they started to organize. And they got into an active mode. And those were the winners. And some of them are, these are rich families today in Germany that have the origin of their wealth from this time.
That's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I think that the 2 points that you're making here is that, what are the needs and wants currently, and the second part is how can I fulfill them, and what can I do? And even if you don't have the skills, how can I learn the skills to fulfill those things? And that desire must be there, right? To see that opportunity. I mean, what an amazing time for so many people that are staying at home. There's so much free resources online that you can go and learn so many different skills, technology skills, whether it could be basic things to more complicated things like programming or this or design, that you can reach out and help people And
Yeah, and there's a need. There's so much need now out there. And one of the things that I always get confronted with when I speak to people in about entrepreneurial mindsets, they come to me and they actually came to me when I started my original company, whatever, mobile. And they came to me when I asked them for their response. They went like, well, but there's companies out there who, that are already doing this. There's nothing new about it. There's what you're trying to do is nothing new. And my response was, and has been ever since, is if you're doing something that others are doing, that's not a negative. In fact, it's the opposite. If you're doing something that others are already doing, it means there has to be a market, there has to be a need. So it does make sense to do something that someone else has tried and be better at it. I always get this response, yeah, but that's not a new idea, so many have done it. And I go like, yeah, but you don't know if there is a market for it. So look at what's being needed, and just, take the same train, and be good at it. And as you said, with the internet, with opportunities to go online, there's so many opportunities to learn and to increase your reach in means of skills and learnings, but also of reaching markets. You can today, as someone from Peru, sell to someone in Kazakhstan because there's the internet. You can do it if your product is good enough.
yeah. Yeah, and I think people need to get. I think one of the things you said earlier in the conversation is that we've seen so much growth, and it's been really good times for so many people over the last decade, that I think people can easily get into a very lazy mindset. I know especially here in the US, where unemployment was so low and it was a thriving economy, that it's easy to get into a place where like I don't really need to strive so much. But now is the time where it's a true test of someone's character. Being placed in a pandemic like this, in a crisis like this, what are you going to do about it? Because how long can you sit on your unemployment for? Are you going to take this as an opportunity to go out there, gather resources in terms of people, find opportunities, create opportunities, and thrive, right? And we have the access to technology that can help us educate ourselves in any way, right? I could start cutting up my curtains and making face masks if I want to. I could go online and learn how to sew. And it's interesting, my wife is part of a mother's group in our neighborhood here in New York City, and there's one lady, and she's just started making face masks, right? From materials.
There's a need for many of them. There is a huge market.
And this will be a need for a while, right? And she started selling them and distributing them, right? You walk in front of a building, she lowers it down with a string, and you pick it up and put some money in the basket, and you move on. And I think those are simple, small steps, right? But everybody can do that. One thing I'll say, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think it's an interesting time for entrepreneurs as well. I always feel entrepreneurs have two characteristics. One is the ability to create something from nothing, and the other one is the ability to perpetually solve problems, right? Entrepreneurs have an idea, they see something, they create it, and then they're perpetually solving problems throughout the day to bring their business to light. And one of the things, I've learned from you, and I wouldn't say, let me rephrase it, I wouldn't say I have learned from you, I'm learning from you, because I'm still learning and not very good at it yet, is the ability to pivot quickly, right? And I think during a crisis like this, any thoughts to entrepreneurs out there on how to pivot? And because I know for me, for example, as part of my business is on speaking, right? So I speak partly, and I travel around the world, and I'm not going to be speaking for a long while. Nobody's going to be organizing any conferences for the foreseeable future. So I have had to pivot my business and turn it in a different direction. And with a lot of your insights and guidance, over the years, I've been able to become better at doing that. Any thoughts to entrepreneurs on this?
I think you're perfectly right, but I also think you left out one very important piece, because yes, there are opportunities to learn. Yes, there are opportunities in the market. You just have to grab them. But also, one thing that I noticed with you, and that makes you different to others, is you asking a lot of questions. Yeah. If you don't know something, I've noticed you going around asking a ton of people for help, for insights, for experiences, whatsoever. And then you take a decision. So love to encourage everyone that is struggling with this and with the content, what we just said is, you don't have to come up with all the ideas on your own. You don't have to come up with all the learnings on your own. You don't have to come up with all the perspectives on your own. But what you can do is you can go around and ask for help. And there's nothing bad about it. It's actually quite nice to add, it's a nice way to interact with people.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of human. We get so much out of it. We get so much more out of it than we ever understand. So I believe asking is and sharing is a tremendous opportunity in that process to gain the insights that you need.
And I think a lot of people feel embarrassed to ask questions, right? I think I've always had the mindset is like, I don't know crap, about anything. So I look at myself as being an empty book, and I have no problem asking someone a very simple question as to, what's 2 + 2? And they go like 4. Okay, that's great. How did you come to that conclusion? And learning. And I think that allows me then to learn and grow. But I think that's great advice. I think that the one main point here, the 2 main points is, you don't have to find all the solutions yourself, right? And if you have an idea and concept, ask lots of questions, reach out. And there's so many ways. And even if you don't know the right people to ask questions, you can go online, you can go to forums, you can reach out to people, you can reach out to experts, and be sincere and be grateful in asking. It's really interesting, talking about gratitude, Lutz said something, as I started this 31-day gratitude practice. It's so fascinating, there's tons of people that message me and email me across all these different platforms. And every now and then I'll pick 1 or 2 and respond. And somebody sent me a paragraph long message asking for my advice. And when I reply, I usually try and reply back not just with 1 emoji or with just 1 word. I try and write back in a few sentences so there's actionable steps that they can actually do. And I wrote back to this person a paragraph long answer with steps. And I never heard back, and to me, it's just so fascinating how people lack gratitude.
That's your interpretation, right?
Sorry?
That's your interpretation. Maybe that person has taken your advice, learned from it, and is now so busy with executing on that he has basically forgotten about it. And maybe he sees this video and he goes like, oh my God, I forgot about it.
Yeah, well, that's the one. Yeah, I love the optimism, but we're never too busy to express gratitude.
I'm with you. Just saying, maybe some people, sometimes, they get busy with other things and they forget about it sometimes. I mean, we all have forgotten about showing gratitude.
No, for sure. And I think one of the things I want to stress, going back on your point of like, when you're reaching out and asking questions, when someone takes time out of their life to give you a little time, to give you a little piece of their energy, always make time to express gratitude. And this is so important, especially in a pandemic, where all our lives are threatened, at any point, all of us have the potential to possibly die from this, right? No one is free from it. So if someone's giving you the time and energy, always express gratitude. And I think, in my 6-step process that I've outlined on my website for safeguarding the mind and strengthening the mind, one of the things in there is gratitude. And it's so important to express gratitude. That's one of the things to help.
And let me add to this, please allow me to add to this, because you said, we can die every day. Which I learned from you is something that is, already happening. It's happening also outside of a pandemic. So, yes, we are in a special situation, but then again, we're in life, and life is the risk. I mean, you can, in a normal life, you can go outside and get hit by a truck and poof, you're gone, right? I mean, so gratitude, I'm completely with you, is something that fuels personal relationships. And the good part about this, gratitude reflects, to me at least, so much back to me. It energizes me as well. If I give gratitude to other people, it gives me a lot of energy for the day.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well, Lutz, thank you so much for taking time to chat about me on these topics. And I hope people can get some good takeaways from it, that, every crisis does have an end. that we can look for opportunities and, try and be as observant as possible to what are the needs and wants currently that are out there. Don't try to solve everything yourself. Ask lots of questions. Be humble. And if you get good advice and good direction, make sure you express gratitude to the people that are giving you your time and energy. And in that vein, I want to thank you for taking time and your energy to spend time in this conversation.
Lovely. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Auf Wiedersehen.
Adios, muchacho.